Her hands did not shake when she took the envelope. That was the part Kwadwo Owusu Boateng remembered afterward. Not the way she thanked him, not the way she folded the paper neatly after reading the number, not the way she said yes, sir, in exactly the same voice she had used for 11 years when he asked her to press his shirts. What he remembered was that her hands did not shake. He had expected them to shake. He had prepared himself to watch them shake. $50,000 was more money than Adaize Ndukwe had ever held in a single moment in her entire life, and her hands were as still as the hands of a woman who had already decided what she was going to do with it. She left on a Wednesday. She took one bag. She did not take the umbrella she had kept behind the kitchen door for 3 years because the Bourdillon Roadhouse flooded when the rains came from the east. She did not take the small photograph she had kept on the shelf above the pantry, the one Kwadwo had assumed was a relative. She did not take the blue ceramic mug she had drunk her morning tea from every day for 11 years. She left it on the drying rack, upside down, as though she expected to be back in the morning. By 4:47 p.m. that same Wednesday, every dollar of the $50,000 was gone. Kwadwo did not find this out for 3 days. When he did, he laughed, and then he stopped laughing, because something in the story that reached him did not fit any version of Adaize he had believed he knew. He had expected her to buy land in her village. He had expected her to open a provision store. He had expected her to do what every woman who had been invisible inside a wealthy man's house for a decade should do: build something quiet and safe for herself, somewhere far from Lagos. She had not bought land. She had not opened a store. She had spent 50,000 American dollars in one day, in one city, and by nightfall the name people were saying in connection with that money was not her name at all. She did not know that the man she had worked for was already asking questions. But the people who knew where she had gone knew exactly who had sent her there. Adaize Chidinma Ndukwe was 43 years old and weighed 54 kilograms, which was 3 kilograms less than she had weighed 4 years ago, when the hospital in Isaleko told her the kind of thing hospitals tell you when they want you to understand without saying it plainly. She wore a yellow blouse that day, a blouse she had bought at Balagun Market for 800 naira, ironed so carefully the collar sat flat as a page. Her shoes were black, flat-heeled, resoled twice by the cobbler near the junction on Ikorodu Road. Her bag was a dark green canvas holdall that she had owned since 1999, the year she arrived in Lagos from Enugu, with a note pinned inside her wrapper from her mother that read, "Do not let anyone treat you as though you arrived without a name." She smelled faintly of black soap and something like warm cotton, the smell of a woman who had ironed her own clothes that morning, even though ironing was no longer required of her. Adaize had worked inside the Bourdillon Roadhouse since the summer that Kwadwo's wife Serena was still alive. She had been hired on a Tuesday in March, shown to a room behind the kitchen that had a window overlooking the generator's shed, and told her duties by Serena Owusu Boateng in a tone that was formal, but not unkind. She cooked. She cleaned. She managed the household accounts in a small spiral notebook she kept in the left pocket of her house uniform, a notebook in which every naira spent on provisions, every vendor paid. Every discrepancy she discovered was recorded in the neat, careful handwriting of a woman who had once been the best arithmetic student at her secondary school in Enugu, and had never stopped being that woman even when the world had stopped asking her to be. Serena had seen the notebook once, by accident, and had sat down and leafed through 3 years of it without saying anything. Then she had looked up at Adaize and said, "You are wasted here." She did not say it cruelly. She said it the way a woman says something she has been thinking for a long time and has finally run out of reasons not to say. Adaize had replied, "Then let me be wasted here, Ma. I am comfortable being wasted here." She had been comfortable there because Serena had made her comfortable. Serena had known her name. Serena had asked about her sister in Enugu. Serena had knocked before entering the kitchen when Adaise was praying, which was something most employers considered unnecessary because most employers did not think about what happened in the kitchen when they were not in it. Serena died in the 4th year. Pancreatic. She was gone in 11 weeks from the Thursday. The first specialist in Victoria Island confirmed what she had already known in her body for 2 months before she agreed to be confirmed. Kwadwo did not eat for 4 days. He came downstairs on the 5th morning, and Adaise had set his breakfast on the table, not because it was her duty, but because she had watched his face on the 4th evening and knew he had arrived at the particular point of grief where the body begins overriding the mind. The jollof rice was in a white ceramic bowl because that was what Serena had always used for his breakfast. She placed it in front of him without speaking. He ate without looking up. That was how they continued for 7 years, him at the table, her at the stove, the spiral notebook in the left pocket. Every vendor paid, every discrepancy noted. She did not know that from the 2nd year after Serena's death, Kwadwo had begun receiving visitors in the sitting room while she was in the kitchen. She did not know their names. She knew the sound of their voices, particularly one voice, a woman who spoke in a rapid, certain way, and who always left a smell of jasmine perfume near the front door that dissipated by evening. She did not consider this her business. She kept her notebook, and she kept her prayer schedule, and she kept the ceramic bowl in the cabinet where Serena had kept it. Because some arrangements exist beyond the understanding of the person maintaining them. The woman with the jasmine perfume was named Temi. She arrived at the Bourdieu Roadhouse 3 months before Kwadwo called Adaise into the sitting room and placed the white envelope on the glass coffee table between them. He had rehearsed it. She could tell by the way he sat. He said that he was making some changes to the household, that he was grateful for her 11 years of service, that the envelope contained a settlement that exceeded what was legally required of him, and that he expected her to be gone by Thursday morning. He said all of this looking at the coffee table rather than at her, which told her what she needed to know about whether he believed the words he was saying. She picked up the envelope. She opened it. She read the number. She looked at him once, just once, the way a person looks at something to understand it accurately before they stop looking, and then she said, "Thank you, sir. I will be gone by Wednesday morning." He had said Thursday. She said Wednesday. It was the only correction she made. She did not sleep that night. She sat in the room behind the kitchen, and she opened her spiral notebook to the last used page, and beneath the final entry, 3,200, generator fuel, 4th August, she made a list. Not a shopping list. Not a grievance list. A list of numbers with names beside them. Numbers she had been carrying in her head and in this notebook for 3 years. Since the evening she had discovered the first discrepancy in the household accounts that was too large and too precise to be an accident. She had not told Kwadwo about the discrepancies. She had not told anyone about the discrepancies. She had simply recorded them, the way a woman who was once the best arithmetic student in Enugu records things, accurately, completely, without drama, because drama is for people who are uncertain of their numbers. By the time she fell asleep at 2:14 a.m., she had counted 11 separate discrepancies across 3 years of household records. The total, converted at the rate her phone showed her that night, was $47,812 American dollars. She wrote this number at the bottom of the page and drew a single line beneath it. Then she slept. She was on the first bus out of Lagos by 5:30 a.m., headed to Abuja. She had made one phone call before she boarded, to a woman named Constance Ekwemi, who worked at the Federal High Court Registry on Ralph Shodendy Street, and who had been Adaize's closest friend since the year they were both seconded to the same relief organization in Benue State in their 20s, during a flood season that neither of them spoke about directly anymore, but that both of them had. Survived in the particular way that floods leave marks on the places inside you that cannot be seen from outside. Constance met her at the Abuja bus terminal at 1:44 p.m. with a folder and a cup of ginger tea in a paper cup. She handed Adaize the tea first, then the folder. "Everything you said was there," Constance said. She said nothing else about it. She was the kind of woman who understood that some information does not need commentary. If this story is already sitting in your chest the way I think it is, stay with me, because what Adaize did next with that folder is the part that changes everything. The folder contained documentation that Constance had spent 3 weeks and 4 favors assembling. A paper trail from the Owusu Boateng household accounts showing a total of $47,812 in payments to a company registered in Temi's maiden name. A company that provided, according to its own registration documents, interior design consultation services. The Bordean Roadhouse had not been redesigned in 11 years. Adaize knew this because she had mopped its floors every morning for 11 years, and the grout lines were in the same places they had always been. There were also 2 other documents in the folder. One was a death certificate. The other was a will. The death certificate was Serena's. The will was the one that had been filed with a solicitor in Victoria Island 18 months before Serena died. The one that Kwadwo's lawyer had told Adaize 4 years ago when she had briefly and carefully asked did not exist. Adaize read both documents without speaking. Then she closed the folder and placed it in her green canvas bag and finished her ginger tea. "What do you need from me?" Constance asked. "Nothing else," Adaize said. "You have already done it." She meant it. Constance had done the structural work. What remained was Adaize's work, and it required no folder, no court, no confrontation in a sitting room with a glass coffee table between them. It required only the $50,000 she had been given to disappear, and the address she had memorized from the will. The address of the charity that Serena Owusu Boateng had named as the primary beneficiary of an estate whose existence had been managed away from her by a man who had kept a woman's dying wishes in a cabinet he locked with a key he had told no one about. The charity was called Nena Foundation. It had been registered by Serena herself in 2014, 2 years before her death. In the name of her grandmother, a woman from Enugu who had raised 5 children in a single room, and who had told Serena at age 9 that education was the only thing a man could not take from you once you had put it inside yourself. The foundation's purpose, as written in its registration documents, was the secondary school fees of girls in Enugu State whose fathers had left, and whose mothers were doing what mothers do when fathers leave. The foundation had been receiving nothing, because the estate had been receiving nothing, because the will had been filed, and then had been managed. Adaize spent the $50,000 in one day. She spent it at the office of a lawyer named Barrister Amara Obi on Amadou Bello Way in Abuja, who was 61 years old, 5 feet 4 inches, and who had built her entire career on cases in which someone assumed that a woman with a canvas bag and a paper cup of ginger tea would not know exactly what she was walking into. She was wrong about the last part. Barrister Obi assumed nothing about anyone who walked through her door. That was why Adaize had chosen her. The $50,000 paid the legal retainer, the filing fees, the cost of the expedited review, and the fees for a forensic accountant who examined 3 years of household accounts and produced a report in 11 days that confirmed what the spiral notebook had already shown. $47,812 moved from a household account to a shell entity. Not over 11 years, but over the last 3. Beginning, precisely, 4 months after Serena's death, when Quadwo began receiving visitors in the sitting room and the smell of jasmine began to reach the kitchen. The legal process took 9 weeks. Adaize stayed in Abuja at a guest house near the ministry quarters that cost her 4,000 naira a night. Money she had saved across 11 years in a postal savings account her mother had told her to open and never close. She ate at a suya stand near the roundabout each evening, and she kept her spiral notebook, and she did not contact Quadwo Owusu Boateng or anyone associated with his household during those 9 weeks. He contacted her on the 41st day, through a message relayed by his driver to her sister in Enugu, who relayed it by phone. The message was, he needed to speak with her. She did not respond. She received news of the court's preliminary ruling on a Tuesday at 10:23 a.m. Barrister Obi called her and said 3 sentences. The first was the ruling. The second was what the ruling meant for the estate. The third was, you should know that the documentation you provided was unusually complete. Adaize said, I kept a notebook. I could see that, said Barrister Obi. The full ruling came 6 weeks after that. The estate, a property portfolio that Serena had inherited from her own family and that Quadwo had been managing since her death, which included 4 plots of land in cantonments, Accra, a commercial property in East Legon, and a residential property in Enugu that Serena's grandmother had once lived in, was to be administered by a court-appointed trustee, pending the validation of Serena's will and the establishment of Nena Foundation as its legal beneficiary. Quadwo's lawyer filed 2 objections. Both were reviewed. Both were denied. On the day the second denial was issued, Barrister Obi called again and said simply, "It's done." Adaize was at the suya stand near the roundabout when she took the call. She thanked Barrister Obi. She ended the call. She looked at the charcoal grill for a moment, the orange glow of it in the evening air, the smell of the seasoned meat, the sound of cars slowing at the junction. And then, she ordered an extra skewer and sat on the plastic chair and ate it slowly, the way a woman eats when she has nowhere she needs to be in a hurry. She moved to Enugu 6 months later, not to the property. The property was the foundation's now, and the foundation had already begun receiving applications for the school fees of 41 girls whose fathers had left, and whose mothers were doing what mothers do. She rented a flat 3 streets from the house she had grown up in, paid a year in advance from the postal savings account, and set up a small consultancy that managed household accounts for 4 families in the GRA who had heard, through the particular channels by which certain reputations travel in certain cities, that there was a woman in Enugu who kept a notebook and never made a mistake, and had once worked for one of the most prominent households in Lagos before she had, quietly, correctly, without drama, taken it apart. She had a business card printed. 17 words. Her name, her telephone number, and below both, household accounts, property management, financial records, no mention of Bourdian Road, no mention of Quadwo Owusu Boateng, no mention of the $50,000 or the 9 weeks in Abuja, or the will that had been locked in a cabinet by a man who had confused ownership with worth. She put one of the cards in her green canvas bag and kept the bag hanging on the same hook by the door that she had always kept a bag on. Because some habits are not about convenience. They are about continuity, about the silent insistence that you are the same person you have always been, even when the room around you has changed completely. The spiral notebook was on her desk. A new one. The old one had been submitted to Barrister Obi as part of the documentation package and was now sitting in a legal archive on Ahmadu Bello Way. The new one was identical, spiral-bound, blue cover, 30 naira from the stationer near the market junction. The first entry on the first page was the date she moved in, the amount she paid the driver who helped her carry her boxes, and the balance remaining in the postal savings account after she paid her first year's rent. Everything accounted for. Every naira present. Kwadu sold the Bordean Road house 8 months after the court ruling. He moved to Port Harcourt, where his brother lived, and he took nothing from the house that had belonged to Serena, because none of it had belonged to him. A fact that had always been true, and that the court had simply made legible. He did not contact Adaeze again. There was nothing to say that the documents had not already said more precisely and permanently than words could manage. Temi was not mentioned in the final ruling in any capacity that required action. The shell company was dissolved. The registration was cancelled. The payments stopped, because the account they had come from was no longer under management by anyone who did not know what a spiral notebook was for. What Kwadwo thought he was doing when he placed the white envelope on the glass coffee table was paying a woman to stop existing in his line of sight. He thought he was purchasing her disappearance. He thought $50,000 was the cost of making 11 years go away. He did not understand, and this is the particular blindness of men who confuse a person's silence with a person's absence, that Adaeze Ndukwe had never once disappeared. She had been in his kitchen every morning for 11 years, keeping a notebook, waiting for the day that the accuracy of her record would become the thing that mattered most. She was not waiting for revenge. She was not waiting for the moment she could look him in the face and explain what she had done. She was waiting, the way women who were once the best arithmetic students in their class wait, for the numbers to finish telling the truth she had been the only one listening for. You can give a person money to make them go away. You can change the locks on a Tuesday and leave someone's name off a document and tell yourself that silence equals erasure. You can believe, for as long as it is convenient to believe, that what happens in the kitchen when you are not in it has no consequences for what happens in the sitting room when you are. But consequence does not require your awareness. It does not require your permission. It moves through paperwork and court dates and forensic accountants and women who kept notebooks for 11 years in the left pocket of a house uniform. And it arrives exactly when the numbers are ready. The world did not recognize what it was standing in the presence of on that Wednesday morning when Adaeze walked out of the Bordean Roadhouse with a green canvas bag and flat-heeled shoes resold twice by the cobbler near the junction. But the world rarely does. That is not a failure of the world. It is simply the way of things. The people who are overlooked are often the ones keeping the most careful records of everything that has been taken from them, because they understood from the beginning that the day would come when accurate records would be the most powerful thing in the room. Adaeze drinks her tea each morning in a ceramic mug she bought from the market near her flat in Enugu. It is not blue. She chose a different color this time, not because the old color meant something painful, but because she is in a different room now, and different rooms deserve different choices. The spiral notebook is on the desk. The green canvas bag is on the hook by the door. The 41 girls in Enugu State whose school fees arrived in brown envelopes this term did not know her name. They will know Serena's grandmother's name. That was always the point. If a woman spent 11 years inside your home, kept records you never asked to see, and used the money you gave her to disappear to instead rebuild something you had buried, would you be angry? Would you feel robbed? Or would you sit with the discomfort of recognizing that what you called her silence was the loudest thing in the house? Leave your answer in the comments. I really want to read it. Subscribe for more stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people the world overlooks until they change everything. I'll see you in the next one.